Hey guys, Alex here and welcome to the show. Today's guest has made his way up from a small car club in Western Australia to one of the most prestigious categories in world motorsport, Formula 2. He's mixed it with the best of the best, and I'm super excited to have him on the show. Calan Williams, how you doing?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me on. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So you've been racing in Europe for the last few years. You're back in Aussie for the off season. What's it like to be home?
Yeah, it's great to finally be home. I mean, it's been since I got back. It was 2 years.
Oh wow!
Since I've been back before.
Yeah.
Because normally I would come home at the end of the season, have the summer here.
Yeah.
But last year, with all of the travel restrictions that were in place, I couldn't actually come back.
Yeah.
So that meant I stayed in the UK. Lucky I've got heaps of family in the UK as well, because my mum's British, so
Okay.
pretty much all her family lives there. Plus, since I've been living in Europe, I've met my girlfriend in the UK as well. So
Yeah.
I still have plenty of company there, but it's always nice to be back home.
Yeah, and so with COVID and everything, and now being back in Australia for a little bit, what do you miss about Australia the most? Because obviously you're in Perth, and that's a beautiful part of the country.
I mean, the obvious answer is always your family and friends. I think when you grow up somewhere, that's something that you can never really replace.
Yeah.
But in terms of other things, just going to the beach with people, that's what we do Christmas Day with the family, as I'm sure heaps of people do as well, because
Yeah.
the beaches are pretty packed.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was great to be back there. And just the lifestyle as well. It is a different lifestyle here compared to Europe and the UK. So, and one that I'd have to say, because I grew up here, is something that feels much more familiar to me. And so coming home is always feels like the place you belong.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And if we have a chat about, where you started. So you started in go-karting in Western Australia, you moved into Formula Ford, and then Australian Formula 3, where you absolutely dominated everyone. Then you moved over to Europe, where you're racing in FIA Formula 3. What was it like moving from Australian F3 into FIA Formula 3? Was there a big difference between the categories and the competition, the professionalism of the whole outfit?
Massive difference, massive in everything. The cars are a lot different. The sort of the environment that you're in is much different as well.
Yeah.
The level of competition is just insane.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing as well is the amount of funding that's required to make that step.
Yeah.
There's a massive jump in the amount of sponsorship required. And so there were a lot of things that changed quite heavily when I first made the move to Europe.
Yeah.
Now, I think one thing that really struck me first was also the circuits. So the circuits in Europe are much different to the circuits in Australia.
Okay.
And that meant that, like, take Barcelona, for example.
Yeah.
It's not a circuit that has anything particularly strange about it. It's a good circuit, pretty standard circuit used for a lot of testing. And you come into the last sector, and there's that almost infamous chicane.
Yep,
at the end of
another
the
one.
lap.
It's horrible.
Looking at it, like, I've actually, in all my experience of racing, never driven one of these in a car.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's super tricky.
Yeah, it's little things like that, but just the nature of the circuits is so much different and requires almost a different driving style and approach to be successful at these circuits. And then put that on top of you racing against everyone who's constantly searching for every little thing they possibly can.
Yeah.
And you've been thrown in the deep end almost.
Yeah, so it's it is the deep end. I guess you moving to a new country, you're driving new cars, you're with a new team, new tracks. How do you get to grips with everything without being overwhelmed? Because you're also racing at an incredibly high level, a world-class level.
Yeah, it's certainly, there's a lot of challenges that there's definitely a lot of challenges that presents.
Yeah.
Especially with all the travel as well, that makes it quite tricky because it makes it a lot more difficult to settle into a routine, which is something that's really important. It makes it a lot more difficult when you're going to a different country every couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And so actually just having a base somewhere is difficult because it's like, well, where do I have a base?
Yeah.
Because I'm spending this much time here and here and here and here and here and here. And it's not even obvious which country you should be in. And so, like last year, for example, basically the whole year was in hotels, B&Bs, etc. And it's just, obviously it's great. You get to see so many great places, but in terms of life away from racing, it makes it really difficult because how do you have a routine? How do you almost find balance where you're in a place where you're constantly in a place that you don't know anyone, you don't know the country, often you don't even speak the language. And so trying to come up with strategies and things to do to actually find that balance and routine when you're traveling so much is very important, but also quite tricky.
And with that, your nutrition and training regime, how difficult is that? You know, because when you're in different countries like Italy or France, or you're all over, there's different foods that you can eat, and obviously that makes a big impact on how you perform as well. How do you go about making sure that you're ticking all those boxes and staying on track?
So one thing that was something I didn't really understand at first was the nutrition side of things.
Okay.
It's not something I have a huge understanding about, and so it made it quite challenging when you're going there and you have, let's say, a 7-hour drive from one place to another. You can't really prepare a meal. You have to eat what's available on the road, which is often not the healthiest type of food.
Yeah.
But what's been really good now is recently I've been working with some people who've been helping me out a lot with the nutrition side and also how to adapt my nutrition when I don't necessarily have the things I need on offer, and sort of almost taking the lesser evil in a sense, and understanding how to keep a healthy diet when sometimes you don't have full control over it.
Yeah.
In terms of fitness, again, it's a similar story where it's tough to have a routine. Obviously, you have a fitness program that is an ideal, and that's what you work to whenever you can. But again, there's also times where you can't do that because of travel or something else. And it's, again, about learning to understand how you can use the time you have available and adapt to make sure that you're doing something consistently with your fitness. Because it doesn't matter if you have this great fitness program if you're not doing it consistently. It's like basically you're wasting your time and you're not going to get any results. There has to be consistency. And so that's another thing that you have to learn and adapt to, and sometimes it means doing your training at a part of the day, whether it's either really early, really late, or after lunch, or you just have to try and fit it in somewhere. Yeah,
wow. And so, I mean, there's so much to adjust to, but you managed to put some great results together in Formula 3, including a podium in France. So just talk us through that weekend, especially after, making that big step, going to Europe, overcoming all of those obstacles and challenges, and finally getting to a point where you're standing on the podium, looking down at everyone. What's going through your mind? Just walk us through that weekend and what emotions you felt.
Yeah, well, that was definitely a great weekend, especially. What was also good about that weekend was the preseason testing in 2021. We were really, really quick, and so we had really high expectations coming into the first round at Barcelona. Now, there was some problems in qualifying, and essentially I lost the weekend in qualifying because Barcelona is super difficult to overtake. I think I qualified like 20th or something, like really, really far out of position.
Yeah.
And it was just, at that point, it's really tough to find any points. So at that stage, it was where you had the 2 races on a Saturday and 1 race on the Sunday. And so the first race on Saturday, you start where you qualify. And then the second race on Saturday is essentially where you finish that first race, is where you start and then progress again.
Okay.
Now, I actually, over those 2 races, managed to get from, I think, 21st up to 11th.
Right.
Agonizingly close to the points, but it was a reflection of the true pace we had and how it wasn't reflected, because Barcelona is statistically one of the most difficult circuits for overtaking. And to move up that far in the field was just, I think, relieving almost after such a tough qualifying day. But again, we still walked away with no points from the weekend, which we really deserved.
Yeah.
Then we come to France, qualified, I think it was 12th. Again, not fully representative, but enough, because that was within the reverse grid system. Come into the first race, start on pole, and this was at a time in F3 where I think this was at a time in F3 where any time I'd started at the front, I'd had something happen. So Hungary 2020, qualified 5th, started 5th, boom, first corner got hit, race done. Next race, start last. Weekend over.
Yeah.
Exactly the same thing in Monza, also 2020, just a few laps later, started 6th, was running in 5th, then got hit from behind, race over, next race, start from the back. A couple of very frustrating weekends in the previous season, and so now we come in and I've got this chance, and it's almost like there's a lot of pressure, because when you have multiple opportunities for a breakthrough previously and they don't come off, then it's like, I really need to make this happen now. Yeah. And so it was on the start line, waiting for the lights to go out for like ages. Eventually they go. Really, really good start. The good starts in F3 are when you almost stall but don't. Okay. And it was great, but still that sort of small moment of your heart dropping when you hit a red circle. Yeah. And anyway, good start, was great. That race was crazy. So I think the guys who finished ahead of me in the race in the end started like 8th and 10th, I think, from memory. It was a constant swapping positions race, was just unbelievable, like something you would expect in Monza. Yeah. Which was really nice, because it wasn't something that we all expected, because if you look at F1 in the past there, it's not been like that. It's often been a race with lesser overtaking. However, in F3, when we were there, it certainly was not the case. Yeah. And so started first, dropped back to 5th, fight back to 3rd, back to 4th, and anyway, crazy race. Ended up finishing 3rd, which was great for me, great for the team. Yeah. And that was certainly the breakthrough that I really needed in F3. Scored points again in the second race, and then the following weekend as well was also strong. So I think that weekend was enjoyable. It was a relief from all the misfortune I'd had leading up to that, and also it was just really exciting, because it was like, yes, this is where I should be. Yeah, just like proving to yourself that's where you belong. Exactly. So with all of that bad luck leading up to that breakthrough point, how do you, as a professional, how do you compartmentalize all that bad luck, all that stress and pressure? How do you put that to one side and focus on the task at hand and just keep moving forward? Do you have meditation strategies, or is it just something that you're naturally good at? So for me, I have a consistent routine that I do before I get into the car. So it's mostly a physical routine, but because it's the same every single time, it becomes a mental routine as well. Okay. And so it's only 10 minutes maybe, but it's enough. It's that sort of switch that almost tells you, okay, now it's focus time. And because I've been doing that for so long, it's almost automatic now. When I do that routine, I'm switched on, ready to go. Initially, when I started doing it, I was a bit skeptical because I didn't see any benefit. Okay. But it's one of those things. It's because it takes time to work. You have to trust the process.
Mm-hmm.
Go through it, keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it, and then eventually it works. And so now it's a really great tool for even going in the sim.
Yeah.
If I was doing something really high pressure on the sim, I could still use that same routine because of the way it works.
Yeah.
And that, I think, everyone's different, but for me, that is the key.
And how did you come about this routine? Did someone suggest it to you, or is it something that you just came up with as you went along?
Yeah, so the routine was initially suggested to me by Formula Medicine in Italy.
Okay.
And then I took that routine that they suggested, figured out what works for me, what doesn't, adapted it a bit until I arrived at what I have now that I can do consistently and just allow me to really switch on and perform.
Yeah, right. And then you moved up to Formula 2 for 2022. How was that? How was the difference between F3 and Formula 2? Because when we look from the outside, in Formula 3, you've got more people competing. It just looks like absolute madness, whereas Formula 2 looks a little bit more refined. Is that a good observation, or is it what's it like actually being a driver on the grid?
Yeah, I'd say that's relatively accurate what you've said.
Yeah.
I think in F2, especially in the feature races where you have the pit stops, a bit more strategy. Mm-hmm. Also in F2, one reason for that difference between F3 and F2 is in F2 the tires degrade much faster than in F3.
Okay. And
so in F3 you're always told of tire management and don't kill your tires. And you think that's the way it feels when tires drop off.
Yeah.
Then you go to F2 and you realize that is not the case at all. So, for example, the first race I did in Bahrain of the season, I finished with 3 tires because I didn't really have that understanding at the time of the tire management, because I sort of took what I learned from F3 and applied it too much to F2.
Right.
This is one of the things that was a mistake, which I learned pretty quickly. And so I had a few lockups in the race on the front left tire. Mm-hmm. And in F3 you can get away with lockups. It doesn't have a huge effect. Obviously it's a bit annoying sometimes.
Yeah.
But I had a few lockups. Anyway, I'm coming into the last lap of the race. I have nothing on this tire now. I cannot turn. Coming into the last corner, hit the brakes. I hit the brakes lightly.
Yeah.
Last corner, last lap of the race, and I'm not fighting for a position anyway. Just tap the brakes, instant lock up, boom, front left.
Yeah.
And then it's actually, because I've locked up so much and worn, well, not even so much, but just enough to wear the tire down through the tread that as soon as I got off the brakes, it was almost punctured. It was gone.
Oh, wow.
And so that's the sort of tire, and that was the hard tire.
Wow. So how do you go about managing those tires? Is it braking a bit earlier and a bit softer, or coasting, or what is it? Is it just making sure you're not locking up?
It's a bit of everything. So obviously the worst things you can do are lock up and wheel spin.
Yep.
They not only do they kill the tire, they also spike the temperature a lot, which kills the tire even more. But yeah, so we do. It's about identifying the high energy moments that the tire undergoes and trying to reduce the impact that they have. So the initial very heavy braking, you try and smooth that off a little bit, often with a bit of coasting before as well, just 10 meters, nothing extreme.
Yeah.
Adapting your driving style, so you have to be smoother with the steering. Understand that you can't really combine as much when you're trying to manage tires. So braking and accelerating while turning is something that you need to minimize.
Okay.
In qualifying, you have to do these things because you need one lap, let's go. Fast.
Yeah.
Whereas in the race, when you have to go 45 minutes at least on one set of tires, whether that's sprint race or feature race, you really do have to manage the tires. It's the temperature as well. It's just about trying to go as fast as you can while limiting the amount of stress that you're putting the tires through.
Right. And then when you're looking at different tracks, are there any tracks that just scare you to death, or any sections of tracks?
Yes.
Which
the
ones?
whole lap of Jeddah.
That's fair enough. There's concrete walls everywhere, and it's super
that
cool.
track is insane. Nowhere else but that place.
Yeah.
I think because the track is so fast and it's just constant walls
Yeah.
around the lap. It's not like Monaco. Monaco, you have walls around the whole lap, but the average speed is much lower.
Yeah.
So it's actually not that bad. The swimming pool section is tricky, but not. I wouldn't say it invokes any fear. Whereas Jeddah, it's all high speed corners.
Mhm.
It's all walls. You've got DRS while turning because the straights aren't even straight.
Yeah.
The actual range of vision you have, because the straights are curved and the walls are on the straight, you can't actually see that far ahead of you.
Right.
All these things combine, and the place is actually, I have to say, that's the only track where I've actually felt quite uncomfortable in a race car.
So how do you, with that, obviously you're racing a single seater with wings and slicks. There's a bit of a gap between the mechanical grip and where the downforce kicks in. How do you approach a track like that? Like, how do you get up to speed enough to make sure you've got the downforce working for you while you're not pushing yourself over the limit while you're getting up to speed?
So a big thing is a lot of that comes down to the sim prep that you do before a weekend.
Okay.
That's a really, really important tool, especially in F2 where you only have 45 minutes practice, which sounds like a decent amount. But you have to also consider that these tires overheat already after one lap.
Right.
So you have to push and then cool down. Then they also need 2 laps to warm up and come in.
Mm-hmm.
Then if you make a pit stop, you have to do another slow out lap and go. And then someone could go off and cause a red flag, so you restart the whole session. But because it's practice, the timer keeps ticking down while it's a red flag.
Yeah.
And so in Jeddah, I didn't even get a full lap of practice.
Wow. Okay, so straight into quali.
I never completed the lap. Yeah, I
Wow.
never completed a lap in practice. And so then it's straight into qualifying. And so then at that point, you just rely on the references you've built through looking at previous footage of the event or everything you've done on the sim to prepare yourself as much as you can so that you know, so you're not going in completely blind.
Yeah.
Then it comes down to working with the team to try and make the sims accurate as possible, because then that improves the preparation you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's all these things outside of the event. We do more driving on the sim for an event than we actually do at the event.
Right. So do your team, they have quite a high-end simulator that you can use, or how does that work?
Yeah, the sim every team has a different setup with the simulator. Some teams have their own simulator. Some teams use a simulator run by another company. But the simulator we had last year was one that was operated by the team within the workshop and was very good.
Yeah.
So I think it was definitely a tool that aided my preparation a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think, let's say on the opposite extreme, I had no simulator, it would have been impossible
Right.
to perform.
Yeah.
Especially in qualifying, you get 1 lap, maybe 2 laps on each set of tires, so you have anywhere from 2 to 4 laps total in qualifying, given that no one sets a red flag off, etc.
Yeah.
And you can't, at that level, there's no way, it doesn't matter how much of a good driver you are.
Yeah.
If you don't have the preparation and you're going into a weekend, you cannot be anywhere close to the pace within 2 to 4 laps.
In Formula 2, there's a lot of time management compared to F3. Was it easier to get close to outright pace and set outright pace in Formula 3 or Formula 2, or about the same?
Good question. I'd say it's probably a little bit easier in Formula 3.
Okay.
To find the limit. Simply because the F3 cars, they still have aero, but relative to F2, they have less aero,
Mm-hmm.
which means the cars are less sensitive to any small moments you might have, which gives you a little bit more of a margin for error.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in F2, because it does have a lot more aero, as soon as the car is not pointing in the direction that it's actually heading, like you have a slide or something happens, you lose a lot of aero very quickly.
Right.
Now, one thing that really stood out to me is when when I went off at Cops in Silverstone in practice, was coming in. When I was watching the replay, you can really see it, because as soon as the car starts to slide, you see the whole thing up off the ground by quite a lot. That's just all the aero going as soon as the car wasn't pointing straight. And then at that point, you're carrying the amount of speed, thinking you had X amount of grip. All of a sudden, all that grip goes, but you're still carrying the same amount of speed, and you're just a passenger at that point.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, I think, that little bit less margin for error you have in F2 makes it more difficult.
Yeah, right. So then when we look at the progression from Formula 3, Formula 2, and the amount of outside pressure, media, the spectacle that comes with it, is it difficult to adjust to that when you're in Formula 2? I mean, now you're in video games, and you're racing around with the Formula 1 circuits. Is that more difficult, or is that something that's a progression through the ranks that you're used to?
It's something that progresses, definitely, but it doesn't mean it's always easy.
Yeah.
It is something that it is tough, the media side, the exposure, but it's also very important for motorsport, especially with as an aid to help find sponsorship deals that you need to bring the funding to actually make what you do possible. And so yes, on one hand it's tough, but on the other hand it's really necessary and something that's very important to get right.
Yeah. So being a professional racing driver, there's a lot of balls that you've got in the air at any one time. What would be, in your opinion, the most difficult thing about being a professional racing driver, whether it be nutrition, on track, off track, media? What is a challenge for you doing what you're doing?
Honestly, for me personally, I think one thing that is tricky is all the travel, and like I was explaining earlier, with how it breaks up your routine and sometimes makes it quite difficult, especially when it's 2 months non-stop of traveling before you can go to somewhere that is that you consider your base. That makes it tough, just because that whole time you're not with any people, you're not with family, you're not with friends. You're mostly on your own for that period of time, constantly moving around. And that definitely has an impact, makes it tough, and is something that you have to learn to deal with. You come up with strategies to help you cope with those challenges, and that's something that throughout my time in Europe is something I've developed, built up with, and I like to think now that I know now that I'm on top of it, because I didn't really, it never sort of bothered me at all last year, and last year was an insane amount of travel. So it's tough, but it's not something that's impossible, as long as you come at it with the correct approach, mindset, you understand the challenges that come with it, and you put things in place to combat those challenges. Then that's what enables you to do it, along with the motivation and the drive that you have to succeed, and understanding that these challenges are part of that journey. Yeah,
no, fantastic. And this year, if we focus on that, you're going to be racing in the GT Challenge, the Europe Championship. It's a full-on calendar. It's pretty packed. How are you looking to approach that? Will you be based in the UK and then flying out to those events, or what's the travel strategy around that?
Yeah, so with that series next year, it's obviously really, really exciting. I think it's going to be a great championship. The team is incredible as well. I had a one-day test with them at Manicourt at the end of last year, and that was a fantastic experience. Really enjoyed driving the car. And yeah, I can't wait to get going. I'll be based in the UK for next year. It's, like I said, because my mom's British, I have the dual citizenship, so it makes it quite easy to be based there, nice and close to Europe. You can even drive across for some of the races. Either take the tunnel through France and drive where you need to go, or drive onto a ferry. I've done both. and it's great. It almost feels like an adventure. Yeah, and I think obviously there's some you have to fly to, but
Yeah.
the calendar is definitely less intense than F2, which is something that's nice. I think being able to having a strong championship for me is not it's not dependent on how many rounds you have.
Yeah.
I think if you have 10 rounds or 14 rounds, it's still a very strong championship, and the right person will be crowned at the end of it. And I think I'm going to really enjoy it. It's a lot of circuits I'm very familiar with.
Yeah.
I think the only circuits that are on that calendar that I haven't been to already are still circuits that I know from just racing on the sim or something like that. There's no circuits in there that are like, oh wow, I don't know that track.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely going to be a great championship. Like I said, can't wait to get going. It's really exciting. It's a new step in what is going to be my career in motorsport.
Yeah, fantastic. So your career coming through the ranks has been focused on single seaters, wings and slicks. How has you did the one-day test with WRT? How was it changing over to a GT car? Was that difficult, or was it quite easy for you to wrap your head around straight away?
So initially it was difficult. I mean, there's not a lot between the cars that compares, and so there was definitely a lot of adaptation that I needed to do. But I think, honestly, I think I got the hang of it quite quickly, and was putting in some fairly decent lap times at the end of the day, which was really nice. So I think I did about 80 laps of Manicourt.
Wow.
And decent lap times compared to people who have years of experience in these cars at a very high level. And so that was something that was really, really promising. And I think that's also been something that has been a strong skill of mine, is being able to stay open-minded and adapt from one thing to another. And I think that's something that really helped when the change is so big and having to adapt. There's obviously still a lot that I need to learn, but I think the pace was already really good, and it's definitely a great indicator going into next year.
Yeah.
This year.
One thing I also I noticed that you're going to be teaming up with Valentino Rossi. He's in the WRT team, an absolute legend in world motorsport. Do you get starstruck by these legends, or is it just another competitor on the track?
Honestly, I've never really felt starstruck by anyone. I think most of the time I see someone as it's another person with some really great achievements that is admirable, but not that someone is superhuman in a way or anything out of this world. I mean, obviously he's a great guy, has incredible achievements and deserves a huge amount of respect for that, but it's not something that would almost make me starstruck at all, because at the end of the day, that's where I want to be. I want to be someone who has a lot of achievements and is very successful. And if I almost put myself in a different category to anyone who's successful, then that just is almost a great way of limiting yourself.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of people who look up to you, you've obviously got quite a big fan base, and you're out there, like you said, doing incredible things. You're living the dream as a professional racing driver. What advice would you give to aspiring drivers who look up to you and who want to do what you're doing?
So I'd say obviously the main thing is it has to be something you enjoy. I think without the passion and the drive, there's no way you could push through the challenges that come with it. Once you're sure of that, then it's also a lot of work. There's a lot of work associated with it, but there is also quite a nice reward that comes with that work.
Yeah.
But yeah, the main thing is ensure that this is something that you enjoy, something you're passionate about, because it's, like I said, it's that passion, that drive, that determination that will push you through the challenges that come up as you progress in motorsport, and more will come up as you progress further and further, guaranteed. And yeah, it's not something that you can do if you look at it as just a job.
Yeah.
Having that passion and desire to really succeed in motorsport that gets you through, and that is the key ingredient, because you have to set strong routines, you have to be strict with your diet, nutrition, fitness training, you have to spend a lot of time away from family and friends, and without that key ingredient you can't make it happen. So
yeah,
it's about that.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for your time, Calan.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time, and thank you for everything.